Hey, so I thought this would be a fun video. I've been machining for a year now. At the time of filming, it is June 6th, 2023, and I got my first mill June 6th, 2022. So I have been machining for 1 year to the day now. What does that year look like? What have I learned? I want to start by saying this is my experience. I have no professional training in machining. I'm completely self-taught, so I may not have everything correct. I may say the wrong thing. This is my experience. This is not a how-to or the law. So I just want to get that out of the way. If something's incorrect, feel free to correct me in the comments. I've only been doing this a year. I'm not an expert. I just want to talk about my experience and what I've been doing because I think it's interesting, and most of the people who follow me or know my stuff don't know most of this journey or story. So I want to start from the beginning. I had a business, Frankenforge Blades, which is my current business still, before I got a machine. I was making money, I was doing stuff, and I decided having a CNC machine would be helpful for my business. And it would help me make more products and better products. So I started saving to get one at the beginning of 2022. I knew towards the end of the year before, I had just made some money the year before, not a ton. I think the entire year I made $5,000. And this year I was saving up, and I wanted to buy a mill by the summer. And I bought a mill in June, which is just as the summer's beginning. I actually bought it a month before I got it. It just takes a while for it to get it. And I bought a Tormach 440 PCNC fully kitted out. Looking back, it was a mistake to buy the fully kitted out mill. As you can see behind me, that's not what I have anymore, but that's what I bought. I saved $10,000 for a basic payment, and the mill cost me a little over $21,000, which if you're a machinist and you know what a 440 is, that is laughable. $21,000 for that mill is kind of ridiculous. It's not a particularly good mill. I got the 770 MX, which is just a world better of a mill for like $5,000 more than what I paid for the 440. But I didn't know better. It was a mistake. It was a good learning experience, and I learned to buy used and not new, especially in the Tormach market. So I bought my mill, and I had never machined anything before. I'd watched a lot of YouTube videos going in. I'd learned a lot, but I had no experience machining. As far as I know, I'd never even seen a CNC mill before. So I get the thing put together, and now I have to learn how to machine stuff. I know the theory and I know the basics, but I've never actually done it. So first, I'd done some programming in Fusion. So I had Fusion, I'd done the CAD. I knew how to do CAD. CAD is computer-aided design, so it's actually designing the object you want to make. I'd done a lot of that in the past, and I knew how to do that. I'm way better now than I was then, but I hadn't really done CAM. I'd practiced in CAM, and CAM is computer-aided machining. It's what the mill actually reads to run the programs. So you tell it what to do, and it runs it, and there's a whole bunch of things that you can do right or wrong that'll mess things up. And so I'd done some CAM, and I'd gotten some feeds and speeds from some people in the community I talked to. Some were helpful, some weren't. And I was kind of ready to start machining, and I didn't really know what I was doing. So I started with machining S35VN, which is a stainless steel. It's a powder steel, and there's not a ton of information on it because it's not a super common steel. It's an exotic metal. So it's not like I'm machining, aluminum or 316 stainless, right? There's not a lot of information on it. So I kind of have to learn how to machine the material from very baseline stuff. There were some starting points, but I had to learn how to create feeds and speeds from just figuring out. And as a machinist who had never really done any machining before, and at this point I hadn't done no machining before, I had no idea where to start. So I just started with basic steel, and I learned my feeds and speeds, and as I progressed, I got better at figuring that out. And I think that's a great learning experience, going from a material that you know nothing about, having very little information on it, and figuring out what's the optimal way to machine this and get the most tool life, and what tools should I use, and how fast can I push them, and what's reliable and what's fast, and how do I get better surface finishes, and when do tools wear out, and how do I machine this precisely. And so it was a fantastic learning experience. It took a lot of time, and I broke a lot of end mills, but I did figure it out, and I machined tons of S35VN, and I have no problems, which is awesome. It's awesome to see that progress and learning that. And so I was still running the 440 and the tool changer. I bought one with the tool changer. If you're buying a Tormach and it's not a BT30 spindle, which is what this is, don't buy a tool changer. I could never get it to work. I paid for Tormach to set it up before it left the factory. It didn't work from them. I could only get it to work sometimes, and it's a waste of money for TTS, which is the tool system on the M series Tormachs. You can upgrade them to a BT30, which I recommend if you want to have a tool changer. That's my experience. I have never gotten TTS to work well. I hate TTS. It's a dumb system. BT30 is way superior. It's a way better system, and the tool changer actually works. I've had a couple issues with this tool changer, but it has to do with air pressure and not the tool changer itself. It lines up, it grabs tools, and the BT30 taper is perfect. I don't have a TTS, but I can put up a picture and a comparison of a TTS and a BT30 spindle. Where was I? Okay, I'm learning to machine, and now I gotta machine handles and figure out how to fixture. And these are things I've never done before, because with the blades, I'm gonna grab a prop, hold up. Okay, so with the blades, I'm cutting them out of a solid piece of steel, and I'm slotting around, and then I'm flipping them over, and I'm locating off of this pivot hole, which is reamed to 1/4 of an inch, and I finish the other side. So that's how I'm machining the blades. And they're just going in the vise, and then I flip them over, and I do the other side, and I probe the inside. Anyways, so going into running handles is a new thing for me because I hadn't really made any aluminum fixtures. The ones I tried didn't work. I didn't know how to hold stuff, so I didn't know what clamps to use. And so making fixtures was really difficult. It took a lot of time to figure them out, what clamps to use, how to hold them securely, how to do them. I talked to some people, and now what I use is, I'll show you. This is my Pearson fixture for the galvanized handles. I have Mighty Bite clamps holding the stock that goes in this slot, and they hold accurately. And then I flip them over into a negative cutout, and in the slot, I crank these down, and that holds them. These work great. I had to figure out how to make these, and I went through a lot of different iterations and stuff, but learning how to make those was fun, and I enjoy making and designing fixtures. It's a lot of fun. It's very satisfying to see a block of aluminum turn into something that's useful and can hold your stock and works well. Even if you have to remake them a couple times or buy some stuff for them, or you trashed an expensive pallet, it can be frustrating, but it's really rewarding, especially when you can press a button and leave, and you come back in an hour and everything's machined beautifully. And so figuring out how to machine aluminum was super easy. Aluminum runs no problem. Don't break tools, it's not an issue. I run as many as I want, and I can make hundreds of handles a week if I want to. I don't need to make that many, but I could, right? I can make a ton of them. So I made a lot of aluminum, and I was figuring out steel still, because steel is the hardest. I was palletizing steel, figuring out, okay, I can make a bunch of handles now. Now I need to make a bunch of blades, right? How am I going to make a bunch of blades, right? I can make the handles. Now I need to make a ton of these, right? How do I make 10 of these, 20 of these, 30 of these a week, right? My goal was 10 a week, right? Totally doable. I've made 10 a week. I can do that. But figuring out how to do that in more of a hands-off production way is really difficult, and I'm still figuring it out, right? Get stuff water jet, ground to size, and then run it on the mill, heat treat it, and all that. I tried hard milling, which looks really good, but is a nightmare to do. Breaks tools, super inconsistent. I hated it. It bent blades. It was the worst. So I pretty quickly decided I'm not hard milling, and I still soft mill, and then I heat treat, which works great. I've had no problem. I've made hundreds of blades that way, and it's by far my favorite way to do it because it's way easier on the tools. You get better tool life, you get surface finishes. You don't get the mirror surface finish out of the mill. You have to do some finishing work for that if you want that, but I'm not a huge fan of that surface finish anyway, so it's not. All right, I don't know where I got cut off, but machining steel was weird. I'm probably gonna cut this down quite a bit. You know, that was my journey with that. And, you know, I'm gonna talk about some basic shop life stuff for the last year and what I've learned. So, coolant is one thing that I've learned a lot about on the 440. It has a single nozzle that just sprays. I'll put a video over here. I definitely have one. And this absolutely blasts coolant. And seeing the tool life and seeing the improvement on just how much coolant and how much better it is on the tool is insane. So if you're first starting a milling process, really pay attention to coolant. If you can upgrade to a ring like this that just blasts coolant, or you can get an array, it's way better than the single shot. The single shot will work, but you do a lot of repositioning for each tool, and they don't get the perfect coverage, and you don't get behind a piece, and you end up recutting chips and stuff like that, and you don't get them out of the way. This absolutely blasts things, and unless you're machining a ton of stuff in a pocket, you're not gonna have any problem with chips. And I've loved that, especially using a roughing end mill on aluminum. It makes these little tiny chips, and you never see them. They're fantastic. Then I started machining titanium, and this is pretty recent. This is in the last 5-6 months. Titanium is difficult. I'm not gonna say I've mastered titanium. I'm not gonna say it's perfect yet, but I've gotten to a point where I'm comfortable running it, and I'm comfortable walking away from it while it's running. After making sure like 1 or 2 operations run correctly, I'm pretty certain that the rest of it's gonna run well. I don't yet run full pallets for it because I make a lot less titanium product, and so I've had a lot less time to test the programs. But once I make sure certain things happening and I come in and I check, it's pretty good. I wouldn't run it lights out, like I wouldn't press go and leave for an hour or 2 and then come back and hope everything's good. I'm not quite to that stage, but running titanium has been the most difficult thing for me to figure out because the feeds and speeds are really specific and the tools are really specific. So for aluminum, I run 3 flutes. For steel, I run 4 flutes when possible. For titanium, I run 6 flutes for 1/4 inch, 4 flutes for 1/8 inch, and I forget the other tools, but 6 to 4 flute tools, sometimes 5. It's really finicky and it takes a long time, and if you go too fast, it buggers up your end mill. If you go too slow, it burns up the material. So titanium, I machine grade 5 or 6AL-V4 titanium. It's kind of a nightmare, but I've been figuring it out, and you have to run coolant, of course. And so it's been a fun thing to figure out, and I have been figuring it out, and I have gotten pretty good at it, but it's still something I need to learn more about, and it's not something I recommend. Like, if you're watching this and you're like, oh, I have a product that I make, and I want to do it. If it's titanium, I don't know if I'd recommend starting there, and that's my opinion. Of course, I'm not an expert. Starting with titanium is a nightmare. I started with steel, which is way harder than aluminum, but if I started with titanium, it would have been way worse, because going into this, I already had 6 months experience in machining, which isn't like a ton, but it is enough for me to understand basically what's happening, and for me to understand how to start a program, how to program, and stuff like that. And I still had a really hard time running it, and I broke a lot of tools. Part of the issue was my pallet was wonky. I remachined my pallets recently, and my tool life went way up, and it got way more consistent. And so if you are running stuff and your pallet isn't great, maybe remake or fix your pallet, and that might save you a lot. It might totally fix your problem. It might not, it might just help, it might do nothing. But for me, it almost completely fixed my problem, just fixing my pallet, which was an amazing thing to see because I knew it was a bad pallet. I didn't think it was causing that many issues, but it was causing a lot of issues, and just fixing that pallet saved me so much time. It took a couple hours to remake the pallets, and I accidentally scrapped a pallet because I'm a moron. So it cost me, $100 in scrapped pallets and a few hours of time to completely fix a machining issue, and it's super helpful. I've gotten other machines. I got a surface grinder a while ago. I've had 2. The first one got dropped off a truck. It was an Okamoto. It was a 16 by 8 inch plate. It was fully automatic. Beautiful machine. Got it for a fantastic price. It was like $7 grand when they normally go for like 20. It was in working condition. Got dropped off a truck. I'll show you a picture. Completely destroyed, just scrap. It was horrible. Now I'm running a hard 618 slicer. Not great machine. It's supposed to be automatic, doesn't work, so I'm manually grinding everything, which is not fun. And in the next few months, I'm going to be looking into getting another grinder or surface grinder, maybe another Okamoto, who knows. I'll talk to some people and see what's what and see what's on the market, because if I'm going to get another Okamoto, it might cost me 20 grand, which I don't have, right? So, going into that. Now, getting this mill. So I got the 440, I realized the 440 wasn't right for me. It didn't have the horsepower to start with. It has like 3/4 of a horsepower. I was slitting with a 3-inch slitting saw to get the slot in my handles, this slot, and it didn't have the horsepower. It kept bottoming out on horsepower, and it just wasn't working. It also didn't, I think the 440 has a 6x10 machine volume, which means functionally you have 5x9. This has 7x14. Functionally, I have like 6x12. Because you got to get over and you got to do surfacing, and you can't machine in one without moving it. You can of course move things around. Without moving it, you can't machine a 6x10 block, right? You can't start with material that's 6x10 and fully machine it because you have to be outside of it. And so unless you're doing a full slot to get that, You can't really do that. There are certain ways to do it, but functionally you can't run a 6x10 pallet and have a good surface finish on like surfaces, and you can't have them all going one direction. So there are ways to do it. There wasn't really a way for me to do it that I can think of. I probably could have run with a 6x10 pallet, but it just wasn't gonna work for me. So I run a 6x10 pallet in this mill, and even then I run into some limitations on the y-axis, which is only 7 inches. I have an inch extra, which is a ½ an inch on each side, and sometimes I have issues with that, so I definitely couldn't have run it in the 440. So I bought this mill. This mill was $5,000 more than the other one. I bought it used from a guy who was upgrading to a Haas, and it is fantastic. Do not buy a new Tormach. I was a first-time buyer, and so I was like, okay, I don't want to deal with used. I don't know what I'm doing. I wouldn't know how to fix it. I'm not going to buy a used machine because I might get screwed. I've bought a few used machines now, and I haven't really had any regrets, except maybe the surface grinder, which is broken, and I can't fix it. I haven't made the time to really dive into it and try and fix it. Even if I did, it's not a good enough surface grinder for me to trust to run fully automatically, right? It's the limitation is the surface grinder itself, not the electronics. So yeah, basically I bought this used for $27,000. Fantastic deal. This machine new is like 40 grand from Tormach. So great price. I got a 4th axis. I got a Pearson mini pallet system. I got a fantastic vise. I got tooling. I got a bunch of stuff with this that I wouldn't normally get. It has the Saunders machine plate in it, which I think all MXs come with. The only thing that doesn't work on this mill is the touchscreen. You can see it's working here, but it doesn't actually work. And that is the only thing. All I had to do was plug in a mouse. When I got it, the encoder wasn't working, which is basically what aligns the spindle for tool changes. And so I cleaned a bunch of gunk out of the spindle enclosure, and I tore that all out, and I cleaned it. It took me a day, and I had a fully functioning mill. I'll show you some pictures. It was full of like coolant gunk. It was nasty, but like that was the one problem that I had, and I saved $13,000 on it, which is fantastic. I did have to ship it from California, which was its own thing. Shipping equipment is not fun, especially when it's big like this, and crating it is expensive, and shipping it is expensive. So, you know, I wouldn't recommend shipping equipment, but you can't get around it. So what are you gonna do? So yeah, this was great. I sold the 440. Used market is way better for 440s. They lose a lot of value. It was a couple months old, had less than 100 spindle hours on it, and I lost a lot of money on that. You know, mistakes were made. It's not a big deal. It was a learning experience. If I can save you from making that same mistake, fantastic. But sometimes you just have to make a mistake to learn from it. So it's not the end of the world. I lost some money on it, quite a bit of money on it, but it's okay, right? Okay, I think I've kind of drifted away from the point of the video. I'm definitely gonna have to cut a lot of that out. But my overall experience with machining has been really good. There's a lot for me to learn. I've gotten a lot of help from people in my community, which is the balisong community specifically. I make knives, I make mostly balisongs. I'm working on other types of knives like folders. And so people in the community have been really helpful, specifically machine-wise. If you know who he is, great. If you don't, go check him out. He makes awesome stuff. He's been amazingly helpful. If you're looking to do this and you're looking to get a machine, find someone who's going to talk to you. I have the benefit of being quite young. I am 19. I don't think of myself like, ooh, I'm young, but people are more willing to help a young person. So if you're young, people are willing to help you more, and they're willing to answer questions because they're helping a kid or whatever, right? I'm not a kid, I'm 19, but to some of you watching this, you're like, yeah, you're a kid, right? So it's more helpful. If you're 50, then, you know, people aren't gonna be as helpful to you, and being friendly and stuff is great. So find people who are willing to talk. Most people love talking shop and love sharing knowledge. There are some people who are like, it's a trade secret. Those people are jerks. Just don't deal with them. Whatever, right? They don't want to talk to you. Don't talk to them. Use websites just for starting feeds and speeds. Proven Cut. I figured that out a little bit ago. Proven Cut is great. I've been using them for the past few months, and just getting some starting feeds and speeds from there is really helpful. They don't end up being my finishing feeds and speeds because I tweak them for my machine or whatever I'm doing, or I'm using different tools as they are from what they are. But they're really helpful as at very least a starting point. Say you're facing titanium What do you start with? What's your surface feed? Why is it making fire everywhere? You need to have your surface feed at like 300 or something, right? So just keep it low. And learning that from people or from websites is really extremely helpful. So I recommend going there, finding resources. And if you want to start machining, make sure you don't just get a machine and decide to make a product from there. I don't know if that would work. It wouldn't have worked for me. And so try to figure out what works for you. If you want to get into CNC machining as like a hobby, and if you've already got the money, and you want to buy like a 440, don't buy the fully kitted out one. The tool changer is not worth it. Buy the base mill, maybe buy the stand, and then build your own enclosure or something. It's way cheaper. The 440 is like $6,000 or something. And so if you just buy that and put it on your desktop, you can learn most of machining really easily. And so yeah, like, that's great. You can get in pretty cheaply. Like, you're not going to run production on a 440. You can. There's nothing stopping you, especially if your product is smaller. Okay, yeah, so machining is fantastic. I recommend you try it if you can. I recommend not buying a mill to try it. Find a makerspace. If you already have a business and already have a product and you can benefit from a machine, but you don't need the machine to be up and running the next day and making money for you, that's not going to work unless you have experience machining. If you're buying a mill for the first time and don't have any experience machining or very little experience machining, you're not going to buy a mill and have it making product the next day. It's not going to work. It took me multiple months to have my mill making money for me. So don't expect that to happen unless, like I said, you already have experience. So if you have a product and it works and you make them by hand and you want it to get into machining to make more of them for cheaper, it does work. Just don't expect it to make money day one, and you're going to have to spend a few months learning. I knew I was going to have to spend a few months, so I made sure to save up a few months worth of money to pay the bills, pay the payments on the machine for the next few months without making money. Anyways, that's my story with machining. I probably left something out, or I did too much. I've been recording this for almost an hour, and so it's going to be fun editing because it's not going to be an hour long. Thank you for watching if you made it this far. Definitely let me know what you think, and if you have a similar experience or you want to get into machining or hand making things, definitely I'd love to start a conversation in the comments of, you know, what you did or how you did it or what you did differently from me. If you are a machinist or something like that, what I did wrong or what I'm doing wrong. I didn't really go into a ton of my processes right now. But like, what are your experiences with Tormach tool changers and stuff like that? Like, I want to know what everyone else has had. Maybe the TTS system works for everyone else perfectly, and you know, the people I've talked to in my experience has been the minority. Maybe it does work. Doesn't work for me. Anyways, let me know. This is a fun video. I might record more of it when I watch this because I forgot something. But it's been a fun experience. If you can, I recommend trying it. I definitely left a lot out. And you know, going forward with this, a part 2 might be great. Maybe I'll make a 2-year video for my business. Like, okay, I've been in business 2 years. What have I learned? What have I done? Where are my numbers? You know, all that. I'm gonna have been in business for 2 years in like a month. And so it's been amazing seeing this. It's been a fantastic part of my life. And I think I will make a 2-year video. I think that is gonna be fantastic. The YouTube channel's only been around for a few months. So yeah, thank you for watching.